Audio test for the meeting stream. Audio test 2 for the meeting stream.
sont enrichis et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. May I ask for a roll call, please?
Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Curry,
Here.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Johnson,
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh,
Present.
Councillor Kelly, Councillor Kitts, Councillor Lowe,
Here.
Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Troster,
Here.
Vice Chair Gower,
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. I think we have quorum. So this is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.4 to 5.6 on today's agenda. For the items mentioned, only those who are specifically identified in the Planning Act who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on February 26, 2025, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Before we get underway with the agenda, colleagues, I just wanted to point out the City of Ottawa and Ottawa Public Health have received a nomination as finalists in the Awards for Planning Excellence that is done by the Canadian Institute of Planners. They've been recognized, and I'll just read this brief paragraph. Ottawa's official plan sets a visionary path for healthy, inclusive, and resilient communities by supporting well-being and embedding the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods into municipal policy, one of the first in Canada. This approach enables people to meet daily needs within a 15-minute walk by bringing services closer to home. It promotes active transportation, green spaces, affordable housing, and climate resiliency. The plan integrates health, equity, and sustainability into growth, mobility, urban design, and economic development. Developed through extensive collaboration, community engagement, and informed by science, the plan positions Ottawa as a leader in integrating planning and public health. I know it was a very big team effort, but the team that has been nominated include Royce Fu, Jocelyn Cadieux, Inga Roosendahl, Peter Giles, Natalie Polchin, John Lunny, Nick Stowe, Lise Guelpgamont, Brigitte Irzenhagen, and Mike Schmidt. The winners are going to be announced. Oh. I know in planning circles, this is a big deal, and Ottawa is looked to as a leader in this space. The winners are going to be announced in May, with awards presented during Action 2025, SIP and OPPI's National Planning Conference on July 9th, 2025 in Toronto. I know I plan on being there, hopefully to see an awards presentation, but congratulations on the nomination. On with the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Confirmation of minutes. Are the minutes of Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 confirmed? Okay, running through the agenda, we are going to receive a presentation on the housing dashboard. We're going to receive a presentation on the zoning bylaw amendment request at 256 Rideau Street and 211 Besser. The zoning bylaw amendment at 35 Mackay and 70 Mackay and Thomas Street. We hadn't anticipated a presentation. Do members want that one held for a presentation? Nope. To the applicant team, FO10, Big Rock Management, Ardington and Associates Design. If committee is prepared to carry this, do you still wish to speak? Okay. Committee, is that one carried? Carried. Thank you. And I'm going to assume that the application for new construction under the Ontario Heritage Act is carried as well. Thank you. At 2040 Aerosmith Drive, we don't have any public delegations for that one. The applicant team is available to answer questions if need be. Did members want to hold that one? Nope. To the applicant team at SHS Consulting and the Gloucester Emergency Food Cupboard, if committee is prepared to carry this, do you still wish to speak?
No,
Andrew?
thank you.
Hi, Andrew. I don't know, Andrew. Andrew.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
If committee is prepared to carry, then I'm happy to just answer any questions, but I don't need to speak or present. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Members, is that carried? Carried. Thank you. Congratulations, Tim. That's a nice project. We do have public delegations at 1020 and 1070 March Road, so we'll receive a brief presentation on that one. At Forest Glade Crescent, there's a zoning bylaw amendment. Staff are prepared to present if required. Did members want to get the presentation? No, we don't have any public delegations. To the applicant team from FOTEN, if committee is prepared to carry this, did you still wish to speak? Fantastic. Thank you. Members, is that carried? Fantastic. That again is an important project. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So we will come back. The housing dashboard presentation, we do need a waiver of the normal rules of procedure in order to hear that. Vice Chair?
Be it resolved that the Planning and Housing Committee approve that the rules of procedure be waived subject to subsection 83 4A of the procedure bylaw to receive a staff presentation on the housing dashboard demonstration.
Thank you. Colleagues, is that carried? Fantastic. Royce and Fatima, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to introduce Fatima Rashid, she's a planner in research and forecasting and the author of our residential dwelling approvals pipeline, IPD, which is item 7.1 on today's agenda. Fatima is well knowledged into the stats and the data that goes behind housing in the city of Ottawa. And we also have Hannah Nisman. She's a senior data analytics specialist with the Data Insights Group from the City Manager's Office. It is Hannah's efforts and talents that has really shaped the look and feel of the dashboard. So together, Fatima and Hannah are well positioned to provide sort of how the city is moving forward on the housing agenda. So I'll turn it over to Fatima to give us a presentation and demonstration.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Royce, and good morning to the members of committee. My name is Fatima Taiba Rashid, and I'm a planner one with the research and forecasting team. Today, I will be giving a brief demonstration of our draft housing dashboard. This draft housing dashboard is in response to the January 29th City Council that happened last month, where Council established a housing progress task force, as well as passed a motion for the development of a new dashboard to show the public the number of dwellings approved by the city, as well as the number of dwellings being built, or in other words, dwellings being granted building permits. So far, we have been reporting on this information already through the residential dwelling approvals pipeline, which is reported to the Planning and Housing Committee every quarter. And once it is received in committee, it is posted onto ottawa.ca, so the city's website, and the background data is made available on Open Ottawa. Our intention with the new dashboard is that this is going to replace the pipeline on ottawa.ca, the city's website, and it would be reported to committee, the Planning and Housing Committee, every quarter, and the background data would still be made available on Open Ottawa. Today, our goal is to give a brief presentation on this dashboard. So before moving on to the dashboard, just so you know, the pipeline that has been going into Planning and Housing Committee so far looks like this. So there is the information previously distributed report, the IPD report, along with two supporting documents, essentially two infographics, one with the quarterly data and one with the year-to-date data. And with that, I will move on to the dashboard itself. So essentially, this is the dashboard, and this would be the landing page of the dashboard, which is the housing summaries page. And the data that would be made available is from Q1 2023 onward, because the starting of 2023 is when we started tracking approvals, and it would be updated every quarter. Now, the key thing to note here is that this housing summaries page has both approvals data as well as building permits data. Now, under key metrics, we can see that so far between Q1 2023 till the current quarter that we're reporting on, which is Q3 2024, there have been 50,191 dwellings approved, which can be split into 25,536 conceptual approvals, which is official plan and zoning approvals, and 24,655 other approvals. So if you click on the information icon here, you can see that all of the approvals are made up of plan of subdivision, plan of condominium, site plan control, minor variance, and severance applications. Under that, we have the permits key metrics. So far, between Q1 2023 and Q3 2024, there have been 15,305 net new dwellings issued building permits, which can be split into 8,300 dwellings from approved applications, which I will be explaining in a bit, and the other, which is 7,005 dwellings from other projects. Now, underneath that, we have the dwelling count by application and dwelling type, with the dwelling types on the left-hand side and the dwelling application type on the right-hand side. Now, this right here is development applications issued building permits. So essentially, so far between this timeline, as we had talked about earlier, there have been 50,191 dwellings approved or granted permissions. And of this 50,191, there has been 8,300 number of dwellings issued building permits. So 16% of that has been issued building permits, and the rest are either remaining to go through the pipeline or to get permits. Underneath that, we have the dwelling count by application type and quarter, with the application type being official plan zoning approvals, more detailed approvals, and building permits, and the quarters can be seen right below that. Now here we have a table with essentially the pipeline itself. So it goes from project concept, which is official plan and zoning approval applications, to more detailed applications such as other approvals and building permits, to construction, which is CMHC starts, and new dwellings, which is reflected in the CMHC completions. It is an interactive dashboard, so the user can interact with it whichever way they like. But one of the main things to note here is the quarter slider. So essentially, if we wanted to see the data just for all of 2023, you can move the slider over till Q4 2023 shows up on the right side of the slider. And the data that you see here is for all of 2023. And similarly, if you wanted to see the data just for this current quarter that we're reporting on, you can move the slider over so that it shows Q3 2024 to Q3 2024. And the data shown is for that particular quarter. And to reset the data, we simply click on the reset icon on top. Now, the second page is, now we're going into more detail. So the second page is the residential applications page that you can see here. And similar to the housing summaries page, there is a quarter timeline slider. And underneath that, we have the key metrics, which is approved dwellings data, as well as change from previous quarter and change from previous year. Now, it is important to note here that the quarter that we mentioned here is the quarter that would be on the right side of the slider. So currently it is Q3 2024, and it shows that between Q2 2024 and Q3 2024, there has been an increase of 1,751 dwellings. And similarly, between Q3 2023 and Q3 2024, so year over year, there has been a decrease of 6,216 dwellings. And right underneath that, we have the dwellings by quarter graph, dwellings by application type, as well as dwellings by dwelling type, which is apartment, row, single, and semi. And this right here is a spatially split ward-wise heat map. So essentially, the darker the shades, the more the approvals in those wards. And it is interactive. And right above that, we can go into more detailed categories, such as the conceptual approvals and more detailed approvals. So if I were to pick out an example and pick the chair's ward, which is Somerset, and if we wanted to see the data for 2024, so Q1 2024 to Q3 2024, so year-to-date data for this entire year. And if we wanted to see just the official plan and zoning approvals for that, for the year-to-date, you can click on OP and zoning approvals right here. And the data that is shown is for Somerset for 2024 in OP and zoning approvals. And similarly, if we wanted to see more detailed approvals, you can click on all other approvals and the data would be shown accordingly. And to reset, we simply click on top. Now we will move on to building permits, which is the page right below that. And this is very similar to the residential applications page. There is a quarter-wise slider. There are the key metrics with net new dwellings, change from previous quarter, change from previous year, dwellings by quarter, dwelling types, and the ward map, which is a heat map. The wards can also be selected from the ward table here or by the drop-down option here. So again, if I pick Somerset and pick year-to-date 2004, so Q1 2024 to Q3 2024, the data is shown accordingly for Somerset. Now, this dashboard will be made available on the city's website, so ottawa.ca, and there would be a section on top with definitions as well as the functionality of the dashboard. And as I mentioned before, the background data will be made available on Open Ottawa. Now, coming back to our next steps, we are currently working on a fourth board, which is the applications approvals timeline. And there would also be an open invitation to meeting with committee members in depth or ward-specific overview if and when needed. And we will be finalizing and hoping to upload the dashboard to ottawa.ca by April. And this is dependent on how much time it would take to get accessibility clearance, as well as to get the dashboard translated into French. And I would like to end the presentation by noting that this is a living document, so we can make further communicative refinements in the future. Thank you.
Fantastic. This is very exciting. I saw members very engaged with the data there. Do committee members have questions for staff? Councillor Tierney.
Great, thank you. A great presentation. I'm very excited. I think this is something that we can all appreciate with a lot of the intensification taking place right now and to really show where it's happening in the city. April, great. You know, promise less, deliver more. I'm not going to tell people April. I know how these things work, but truly excited about this. The only one question is there going to be any raw data feeds at all, open data, anything available to plug it into our own personal ward specific sites? Just a question. If not, no worries. We'll refer back to this specific one. But I do have a planning page in my area on my website, and it would just be nice to plant it in there. But again, I'm not going to lose sleep over it because this is beautiful and it's great work.
Through the chair, the data will be made available on Open Ottawa and it would have the ward-wise split on Open Ottawa. The IPD would also still be going to a committee every quarter. It would not have the ward-wise data, but Open Ottawa definitely would. Thank you.
Excellent news. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vice Chair.
Thanks, Chair. So thank you for this. I'm looking forward to seeing it launch and having it available to residents and other stakeholders to review. Obviously, the interactive nature is new. The ward-specific information is new. We didn't get that in the quarterly pipelines. The ability to sort of move that slider and see different timeframes is new. Is there any other new information that's not currently in the quarterly updates other than what I've mentioned that should be highlighted?
Chair, there's also the split by the application grouping types. That is also new. We've kind of grouped into two categories of the conceptuals, which is official plan and zoning, and the all other applications, more detailed from plan of condo, site plan, and et cetera, is that. And we're also working on the fourth board that Fatima mentioned, which is how we would report on how we are doing for approval timelines.
Okay, okay. So I wanted to ask something on the split there between the OP and zoning approvals and all others. Is there any overlap there? Like if someone got a zoning approval and then a site plan, are they double counted or are they distinct in the count there?
Through the chair, it would not be double counted. So we go through all the applications and remove duplicates. So that would be removed. That wouldn't be any double counting.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. So just a couple questions. What was the rationale for splitting out the zoning conceptual approvals versus all the other more tangible approvals? Why did you offer that in two separate numbers?
So Chair, if we were to think about sort of the development of housing from a pipeline perspective, project concept really sits at that official plan and zoning approval stage where a project needs to have an approval for it to move on to more, detailed information, more investment by those who want to move a project forward, right? So there's a maturity there. There was also, I think, with market timing, right? So they may get those approvals for the land use specifics, but they may wait for the market and then go to more detailed applications, eventually leading to building permit. So it's more of a sort of a timeline from when a project would go from sort of a concept, some assurance on land use approvals, and then when the timing is right, they would go through the more detailed applications and to get their building permits and then construction.
So sort of to tag on to what the previous speaker said, it might not be that they're double counted, but they may reappear in that numerical count as they move into another phase, correct? They won't only appear once in the count in terms of its uniqueness that way.
So a dwelling in the pipeline is reported at the latest stage. So if a project with, let's say, 100 dwellings received official plan and zoning approvals and then subsequently site plan control approval, the 100 dwellings would be reported under their site plan control approval and that would not show up on official plan and zoning stages.
Okay, thank you. And will there be any opportunity for the rationale of how the data is presented to be offered as an addendum or a supplement so that people can understand exactly what you've just said when they're interacting with the dashboard?
Yeah, that's a great point. So that part of the upload to ottawa.ca will also include like another web page that will provide a lot of the context that I just described in terms of what's the approval pipeline, the different categories, and what is expected in each of those categories.
Okay, fabulous. So yeah, something around the methodology I think would be very appropriate in this case. So with respect to the fourth board, we're trying to get at sort of what the city can control with its own abilities to approve versus what happens in the market. So are there going to be, both with the decks that we've seen, but also with that fourth board, any reference to, the expected targets that the city has and, what the gaps are and where the gaps lie to try and tell the story of how, the city has been meeting our timelines. We have been approving, we have been creating density. We have been, doing everything we can to advance housing in the last 2 years, but gaps remain that are perhaps more in the broader economic landscape. Are we going to try and tell that story, or is it fairly static? Like, are we going to benchmark against what we're aiming for and what the gaps might be and what actors have that in their purview?
So in terms of the target timelines for approvals, the board will try to identify what those targets are and how the city is meeting those targets. In terms of the story for the gaps for our other housing targets, whether it's the Building Faster Fund or the Housing Accelerator Fund, we will continue to report that in the IPDs quarterly to this committee.
Okay, and final question, thank you. Are we going to be able to highlight multiple wards at once for a cumulative by transect, let's say, effect?
Through the chair, yes, it is possible to select multiple wards.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to add my thanks and appreciation for this new tool. Anything that makes data available to the public and decision makers is excellent. So thank you, and thank you for the presentation. To my colleagues, this helps us counter the false narrative that cities are not doing enough or anything to facilitate housing across this province, whether it's housing advocates, the provincial government, or developers who like to kick municipalities. We are doing our part, and this tool can be shared to all of our friends across this province that we're doing our part. One request I've had for years, and I don't think this is as important as your tool, the data in your tool is, to counter that false narrative is, I've always been interested to know when applications come in that staff work on that we're not even aware of. There's a lot of good work that is refining an application that's happening behind the scenes, and modifications are being made. Unit counts go up, unit counts go down, and finally we get a spit polished application that finally makes its public light of day. But again, the public doesn't see all of the changes that our staff are working on, planning staff with the applicant, to make the application better. And so again, we get accused of approving the vast majority of applications that come before this committee. It's because there's so much work that goes on, and applications that are not sound don't make it because they're deficient. There's a lot of things our staff. So to staff, are we at a point where we can get that type of information? I'm not suggesting in a tool similar to what you've presented today, but is there any way that the public can understand applications that come in that never make it to committee, or we can see the net difference in applications from the point of first received to when it actually comes to committee? I've always been interested in this point.
So Chair, I think we can take that away and take a look at it. One of the underlying issues with presenting that information is the collection of that data and storing the data. So if that's not being collected, it'd be hard to post that or display it in any fashion.
Chair, if I may add to that, the applications that come in, once they are deemed complete, the proposals and plans and studies are all available on the DevApps page and the city's DevApps page. And as we go through different iterations, those plans and studies are updated and they are also uploaded onto the website. And I certainly appreciate the councillor's point that there isn't a summary of where we started and where we ended. And that's something that we can take away and see if there is a way to sort of summarize the difference from beginning to end. I would also point out that, through the changes in our process and the change to our pre-application consultation process, the discussions that are happening before an application comes in are not the same as they were under the Bill 109 timelines, that there's a really, we have that, we're typically seeing one pre-application consultation to identify the required plans and studies lists, have a brief discussion about the proposal and concepts, and then that application is coming in the door. So that is, something that we can take back, Chair, to think about if there is a way to demonstrate the beginning and end, and whether there was additional height or reduction in height or additional units that I know are some of the things that we talk about at committee. And I'm happy to consider that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Troster?
Thank you so much. Well, to quote Leaper, City Council approves housing, but builders build. And we can see the discrepancy in the dashboard figures between what we've approved and what the actual housing starts are. Given that discrepancy and the fact that none of that is under the city's control in terms of when the starts actually happen, do you believe that we are in a good position to receive our next tranche of Housing Accelerator Fund money based on the commitments that we made in terms of approving housing?
So Chair, the Housing Accelerator Fund next tranche is based on meeting our action plan. The last tranche is really based on the building permits, which would be in 2026. So that is under the Department of Strategic Initiatives. My understanding that we are moving forward on our action plan for the next tranche.
Okay. But the final tranche will be based on building permits, not on approvals at committee.
That's correct.
And is there anything in our power to speed up those building permits once we've done our work here at committee? Do we have any tools at our disposal?
So that's one thing that staff is looking for, is trying to make improvements either through the planning process or even the building code stage. And we're constantly having discussions with the industry and what those roadblocks are and how we can move those files faster.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's a constant push-pull, but it is enormously frustrating when we're doing our job. We're approving thousands of new homes every year. But there's a lot of market factors and, you know, supply chain issues and other reasons why a builder might get a zoning amendment and then just sit on it. So thank you very much. I appreciate all your work on this, and the dashboard is great.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. I think housing nerds everywhere are very excited today. No, this is great. I'm going to ask what could be a dumb question, but you know, if you were in a room just in my office, I could feel more comfortable asking it, but I'll ask it. Is this catching the small stuff? Is this catching the infill, or is it just on the big projects? My numbers are pretty high. Bay Ward's just behind Somerset, and I'm not trying to be competitive here, but I wonder if it's catching what we hope to see as the infill, especially when we're shooting for, you know, allowing 3 to 4 units per property. So just want to know how that fits in.
So Chair, some of those infill projects, so small infill projects, may require minor variances and or severances, and they would be captured under the all other approvals category. As of right construction would be captured under building code, building permits issued. So all those small projects are captured, depends on the category and what that project needed for an approval.
Okay, so any new construction, any new unit would be captured. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And thank you for that clarification. Hopefully, as we get the comprehensive zoning bylaw done, we'll see more and more as of right development, which is a key goal for us. So capturing the building permits is going to be important. I can only reiterate my colleagues' thanks for the tool. I know we're all going to want to dig into that. Is there the opportunity to show this to some of the other municipalities? Our data team continues to lead, I think, in Canada in terms of tools that they're making available. I don't know if other municipalities might want to take a look at the tool you built and talk to you about it, but I certainly would hope so. With that, I will just ask my colleagues if this report is received. Amazing. Thank you very much. We will move on. The next item is the zoning bylaw amendment to 256 Rideau and 211 Besserer. Just to refresh the memory of members, this is a staff recommendation for refusal. We're going to get a brief presentation from staff on their reasons for recommending refusal, and then we'll hear, I presume we'll hear from the applicant. Yep. And then we'll hear from the applicant. Please raise your hands.
Good morning. My name is Eric Forhen. I'm a planner with Development Review Central. I'm here today to present a zoning bylaw amendment application at 256 Rideau Street. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending refusal of the requested amendment as shown on screen, which seeks to significantly reduce the minimum total amenity area for an existing building. Next slide, please. I will now provide a brief overview of information relevant to the application. First, the proposed development is in downtown Rideau. The existing mixed-use building is a very dense development. It is constructed to the full extent of the subject property and consists of 574 residential units on a relatively small through lot. Next slide, please. Unit sizes in the building are generally small, and the amenity areas are mostly communal and internal to the building. For context, a Committee of Adjustment application for minor variance was submitted in February 2022 and proposed to reduce the total amenity requirements at the time from approximately 3,400 square meters to 2,280 square meters. The Committee of Adjustment refused this application, and the decision was subsequently appealed to the OLT by the owner. On September 12, 2023, the OLT issued a decision which established a reduced minimum total amenity area for 566 dwelling units. Next slide, please. Since then, the total unit count of the existing building has increased by 8 units, from 566 to 574 units. The proposal before you today would have the effect of removing existing amenity areas on the 3rd level and the penthouse level of the existing building to facilitate the increase in an additional 5 dwelling units to a total of 579 units, as shown in the diagrams on screen. This rezoning application would effectively increase the total unit count while significantly decreasing the total amenity area by approximately 930 square meters below the OLT approved total. Next slide, please. Staff must consider public input and several policy documents to determine whether a proposal is appropriate and represents good land use planning. We've reviewed consistency with the provincial planning statement, 2024. We've reviewed conformity to the official plan and conformity to the Essential and East Downtown Core Secondary Plan. And finally, we review the zoning bylaw and related design guidelines as they apply to the site. Next slide, please. Following our review of these documents, staff do not support the proposal. First off, both the lack of balconies and the small unit sizes in the existing building place further importance on communal amenity areas to provide additional active and passive recreational areas where this is not made possible in the dwelling unit. The removal of these areas will provide significantly less shared living space in the development and therefore has impacts on existing and future residents. Staff also received concerns from the public regarding the lack of amenity area being provided and related impacts on residents both in the building and in nearby developments. By removing amenity areas which support opportunities for a high quality of living and the long-term needs of residents, the proposal does not support the improvement of quality of life for people and the achievement of complete communities as directed by the PPS. In our opinion, the proposal also fails to meet the livability objectives of the official plan, which are embedded in the housing and intensification and urban design policies. The existing development is already very dense, and the total unit count already by far exceeds the applicable minimum residential density requirements of the official plan. The urban design policies further state that amenity areas shall be provided in residential development in accordance with the zoning bylaw and applicable design guidelines. Staff support intensification, but not at the cost of valuable amenity space, which we argue is intimately tied to providing an appropriate form of residential intensification and ensuring communities are livable for all. Finally, the OLT determined a minimum total amenity area. At the time, this represented a significant reduction from the zoning bylaws requirements. Providing significantly less amenity area to accommodate more dwelling units is contrary to the OLT's previous decision and represents a further departure from the requirements of the zoning bylaw and therefore moves the development further away from conformity with the official plan. Therefore, for these reasons and those further detailed in staff's report, the proposal is not appropriate and does not represent good land use planning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for a concise but very clear presentation. I wanted to give an opportunity to the applicant. There are no public delegations on this one. Good morning, gentlemen. Whenever you're ready, we'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee, at which time members will have an opportunity to pose questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. My name is Tim Bede. I'm with FO10 Planning and Design, representing the applicant, and this is Tyler Yakachuk, also with FO10. We all try to keep the presentation succinct, but we're happy to answer any questions or clarify any statements we've made afterwards. So the application today before you is technically to permit reduced amenity area. But the true intent of this application is to increase housing availability during a housing emergency in Ottawa in line with the growth objectives of the official plan. To be clear, there are already proposed and included amounts of 20,000 square feet or 2,000 square meters of amenity area within the building. As I will discuss in just a moment, this amenity area is high quality, well-programmed, and able to adequately provide for the residents' needs, improving quality of life and opportunities for social, recreational, and personal development. Importantly, the development in the building is now under new management and new ownership. And since the original submission, they have committed to, which was made in 2024 in the summer, they've committed to converting existing space within the building that wasn't previously used as amenity to amenity space, adding an additional 7,000 square feet or around 668 square meters of amenity in the form of a communal lounge. Therefore, the 1,350 square meters as referenced in the staff report in the original application is no longer accurate to the proposed development. The provision of these additional dwelling units in a vibrant, well-served and central neighborhood directly achieves a number of the city's objectives in the official plan, secondary plan, and other policy guidelines. And further, the units as proposed are fully furnished, have access to laundry facilities, and are designed to be attainable for students and young professionals. This is a key demographic that faces barriers to housing attainability and adequacy and conveniently located units. Next slide, please. So I'll just go over the existing amenity space very briefly. The building currently provides the following: a lounge area in the first floor, which includes a pool, an associated sitting area. There's a fitness area on the next slide. On the third floor, which includes both cardio machines and free weights. There's on the next slide a study lounge and kitchenette on the third floor. There's also study lounges and outdoor patio space on the ninth floor. And there's on the next slide what they're calling a sky lounge. That's this previous slide there. So there's a very healthy and robust mix of interior and exterior programmed and passive recreational space on top of the newly committed 7,000 square feet of additional lounge space to be programmed and used and developed in conversations with existing and future residents. Next slide, please. Further, the building provides a number of other amenities which don't meet the criteria or eligibility as per the zoning bylaw's definition of amenity area, but are certainly amenities that can be used to benefit the quality of life for residents, including interior protected and secure bicycle parking, as well as stroller storage. And on the next slide, we can see there also is the provision of an in-building accessible 24-hour grocery store that benefits the residents of the building. Next slide, please. To augment this 20,000 square feet of provided amenity space, the existing building is also located in a vibrant and extremely well-served neighborhood with additional public and private amenity space in near proximity. This context which supports the reduction in amenity space that's proposed today includes over 10 to 15 city parks within 1 kilometer's walking distance, the Ottawa Public Library branch on Rideau, or the Rideau branch, the Champagne Fitness Center, and the University of Ottawa campus. Obviously, some of these are institutional or private, but it speaks to the full suite of amenities that are available to residents in this area. Further, the Rideau Shopping Center is in close proximity, again, a private but publicly accessible space with outdoor space on the roof and interior space within the mall is in close proximity for use by residents. And obviously, a number of students in this building are residents in this building are students, and they have full access to the University of Ottawa campus in the form of the lounges, libraries, study areas, and other amenities which are provided within the university campus. Again, to help augment and support quality of life for the residents of this building and in this community. Next slide, please. Although I don't have the time today in this delegation to go fully assess the staff report and their conclusions that recommend refusal, I'd like to respectfully assert that our disagreement with many of the key findings and the policy interpretations which led to that refusal. This property is designated a Main Street corridor in the downtown core transect. At large, the official plan and secondary plan are promoting residential intensification, well above, as was mentioned, the minimum requirements, which is a minimum. There's no maximum requirement for densification and intensification here, and promoting 15-minute communities for residents who need to live and work and enjoy their lives in this community. The proposal advances a suite of other policy documents, which had led to the original approval by Council and at the OLT for the height, use, building design that warranted this approval. For better or worse, the zoning bylaw and the relevant policy documents don't specifically speak to the height or the amount of space provided, but simply provisions of those spaces. I'll move on to in the OP,
Tim, I'm sorry, you're out of time. I
Okay.
can't move on to a new section. Did you have a final concluding thought?
Sure, I do, yeah. The 20,000 square feet of amenity space here is provided to allow for residents to fully enjoy the use of the building. The city has many R4 zones, but don't require any amenity space at all. And this building provides a significant amount more than that. This is an opportunity to address the housing shortages within the community, while also providing for robust and well-programmed amenity space in this building. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And I do see a few, Councillor Trosser.
Yeah, so remind me, this building, is this the one that's geared to students?
It is. It's called the On-V Student. So obviously we can't predict how many students will and will not be in a building at any given time, but it certainly is advertised to students. It's heavily advertised on campus. On the website, it's specifically directed to students, and in the name of the building itself, it's named.
So are the apartments typically very small, like they're kind of dorm room size?
Yeah, they're modest in size. They're smaller than maybe the full 2 or 3 bedroom units that you might see in other parts of the community, but they're specifically designed to address this demographic.
And like how big is like an average bachelor or 1 bedroom?
Between 30 and 40 meters squared, so 3 to 500 square feet.
3 to 500 square feet. Okay.
Which is fully furnished. I think an important thing to consider is if balconies were provided, which would add to the amenity space, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be on the exterior of the building. To meet the amenity space provisions, they could be provided eating into that square footage of a unit. And so there's no guarantee that adding balconies, as was suggested, would actually maintain these unit sizes. There is no limit on unit sizes here in the bylaw. And so what we're doing here is trying to provide communal critical mass amenity space that can service the residents of the building without eating into the living space of the units.
Okay, so what are you seeking to convert into 4 more apartments? It's 4 more you want to add, correct?
There are 5 more units that are provided here.
5 more units. So what is there now that you want to convert?
They are segmented study spaces, which are when the property changed hands, there was an assessment of the operational functionality and efficiencies in the building. These individual study units were not well used. They were segmented, they were small. And so the decision was made that they could be better used for individual bachelor style apartments and converting those to the residential units, while then looking for more space, as I mentioned, unused commercial space, for example, in the B2 section it's 460 square meters. It's now being converted to that lounge area that I spoke to. And there's other space within the building that they're trying to augment that amenity space currently provided while lessening any negative impacts of conversion from those smaller, less
So
well-used.
is it your assertion that the developer's plan have changed since you first submitted the application, which is why you have a problem with the refusal?
I think in general.
Because you're doing a switch with other unused space in the building that you think would add up to a similar amount of amenity space? I'm just trying to understand your
Sure.
argument.
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to clarify here. As we worked through this application with city staff, we indicated that we were very willing to discuss their reservations and find solutions that would help them to feel more comfortable in issuing an approval report here. One of the things that they indicated was that they, and I don't mean to put words in their mouth so they can clarify their statements, but that they were looking for additional amenity space at what was provided and approved at the OLT decision. So the current owner and the previous owner worked to look for that space within the building. They noted that this previously underused commercial space could be converted quite easily to amenity space, and they did that to try to bring it up to the 2,000 square meters. We didn't hit the 2,300 as approved by the OLT, but we were attempting to find as much amenity space as possible to mitigate any concerns that might be present here.
Okay, one more question. These spaces that you want to convert, do they have windows?
There is not the existing spaces that are going to be converted, but throughout the building, the remainder, so this is about 800 square.
No, but what you're going to turn into apartments, will there be?
Oh, yes, sorry,
Okay.
yes.
Because I'm picturing a basement space and I'm wondering.
So to clarify, we're converting those existing study spaces, which are above grade.
They're above grade.
To residential units from amenity, but then to help to mitigate that loss, they're also converting underground commercial space to amenity space.
Okay,
So
so
all
the
the
amenity space would have no windows. It would be underground.
This small portion of the amenity space, it's 460 square meters. The remainder of the amenity space throughout the building at around 16,000 square feet will be in the form of the Sky Lounge, the outdoor patio on the 9th floor,
Okay.
and then other spaces throughout the building with windows.
Okay, yeah, I wish I could hear from some of the residents about what it's like to live in such a small apartment and what kind of amenity spaces they would find useful. Anyway, thank you very much for being here. It's very rare that we get a refusal from staff, so I think we'll certainly have some questions for staff after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. So again, just to clarify, the net increase in units would be how many?
For this application at hand today, 5 additional units are proposed to be converted from the existing amenity space on the 3rd and penthouse level to residential units.
Okay, and again, to be very clear, what current amenities would be eliminated if this was approved? Not the staff recommendation, but if you went ahead with construction.
Sure. So those spaces, those 5, which were previous amenity space for study or personal use, would be converted from individual segmented units of study space to residential units. And then with this, we're also proposing to convert unused commercial and storage space to additional amenity space of about just under 1,000 square meters.
Okay. Doesn't sound too bad. So I'm willing to ask staff some questions. Is that, you also made a statement that you had some issues with the discrepancy in the staff report on amenity space. Is that what you mean with that clarification?
That wasn't, this was communicated, this change was communicated to staff and they understood that that's what we were attempting to do to work with them to find solutions to what they believed to be undesirably low provision of amenity space. And so I think that was communicated well. Obviously, the staff report had been written previously, and so it's difficult to change that moving forward to the Planning and Housing Committee date. So I was just hoping to clarify today that there was, on top of what was originally proposed, there was an additional 800 and some square meters of amenity space. The discrepancies that I was referring to were how we reference amenities and an amenity area within the various policy documents which direct development in Ottawa, and that for example, in the secondary plan for this character area, there isn't a reference specifically to amenity space. However, in the staff report, they reference a different character area to say that that character area specifically speaks to amenity area. That's not how you read policy. Policy is specific to the location of the site for which it is applied to. And we just wanted to ensure that there was clarity there. Further, in the official plan, the staff report indicates that it directs amenities to be interior and exterior of the building. However, within that reference, within the staff report, there isn't a full description of what that policy statement actually says, which also speaks to private and or non-amenity area amenities, which is why I reference the grocery store, the laundry facilities, the stroller parking, things of that nature. like I said, for better or worse, most policy documents reference amenity area and amenities in a very high level perspective without specifically directing programming, amount of space to be provided. And so we think here what we're doing is a quality over quantity approach. There's a critical mass here of 20,000 square feet of amenity space that is well suited and programmed to address residents' needs.
Okay, if I'm an existing tenant now in the building and I really love that study space, I have a lease with you and I don't know what the lease says, but is there any type of requirement to compensate existing tenants who use amenity space, which will now be no longer provided?
And I can't speak to the specifics of the lease agreement and if there was any wording in there that would specifically guarantee this precise amenity space. But what I can say is that is a concern of the applicant, which is why they worked to find new amenity space to provide to the residents. There are still study areas within the building. There's still lounge and communal areas within the building. The idea would be to take these 5 segmented spaces and find more communable, workable, and programmable space to serve those needs that may be lost in converting the amenity to residential.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the answers to my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for the developers. Is there a comparable building that you know of that has this exact amount of amenity space?
I thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't speak to another building with this exact amount of amenity space, but what I could speak to is I kind of ran out of time, but one of the zoning considerations here is that, first of all, the zoning bylaw applies amenity area calculations as a blanket across the city. It doesn't take into consideration community context or the building's provision of what type of amenity spaces exist within the building. And so unlike, for example, the parking requirements throughout the city, which are detailed and specific to various areas based on their context, and then that provision of parking can go up and down. Amenity space is not calculated in that way. It's across the board. And so there is that consideration throughout the city that when in a well-served and very urban and dense community, potentially if the amenity space that is provided is well programmed and suits the needs of residents, then it wouldn't be as necessary in terms of a quality life consideration as it may be in another green build area where they don't have that full suite of community and city amenities. Secondly, the R4 zoning, the new R4 zones, UA through UD, decided and were approved by City Council to remove the requirement for a specific amenity area in favor of rear yard landscaped space. And so that space is not going to be necessarily programmed as amenity area. It could potentially be used by the residents if they wanted to sit in the backyard, but there is no consideration. And so in that situation, there would be technically zero amenity space provided. This is further kind of important to consider, given that if it's outdoor at grade during our winter months from November to March, if that isn't programmed and maintained during that time of year, there could be zero space for residents to use outside of their own residential units. Again, there was a consideration there when council made that decision to provide for efficiencies and bringing new units on in that multi-unit typology rather than mandating amenity space in those specific instances. So I think that the context is important, and considering other city initiatives that have reduced amenity space either on a site-specific basis or in this instance across the board for certain new residential low and mid-density developments.
Thank you for that. The other question I have is, certainly it sounds like students would be highly attracted to a building like this in future, as our aging population, as we experience that in more so than we are right now. Could you imagine this ever being transformed into more of a seniors residence?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that is potentially a possibility. I can't really speak to the intentions of the new owner in a long-term perspective. Obviously, these suites are fully furnished. They are provided laundry within the building. The grocery store, if it remains a tenant, is quite an asset and an amenity here. There is, workout rooms and other types of study and gathering spaces. So I think given a different time and era, if students weren't occupying the building and it changed its approach in terms of advertising and in which tenants it was looking to attract, the building could likely accommodate that transition to a different demographic.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm quite sympathetic to the developers here. I've seen buildings just like this in Kingston, and they work very, very well for students. And I see how they do have other options, especially if it's students, so that to go to, campus, to go to the libraries, to go to other areas of the city. This is a unique building. I understand what staff are doing and that they're looking at what our criteria are and, what the OLT said. But I have seen these buildings, and that's why I asked my first question, in particularly in Kingston, more than one of them. And they're amazing places for students in particular. So I certainly will listen to anything more that staff have to say, but I'm sympathetic here to what the developers are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you. Just to clarify, is the applicant running the grocery store?
No, that's a private retail tenant.
Right. So that tenant could change?
Certainly.
Okay. So I don't mean to be fussy about this, but all of College Ward is cranky about the promise of a grocery store that never materialized. So I would strongly recommend that we do not reference the type of, the fit up is there, but the tenant can change at any time. So that's just a little bugaboo for me. I just would really appreciate if we don't use the word grocery store. But that being said, and Tim, you represent that one too. So you know what I'm talking about. So that being said, you also made reference to these units being bachelor type units. Are there other units within this building that are not considered bachelor type units?
I would say that the majority of the units would be those single bedroom units.
Okay, so similar to, I was just recently reviewing the Algonquin College housing survey for their students, and certainly there are students that come with families, or the students that choose to come with families, whether that be a spouse or whether that be a spouse plus child. And so it would be worthy of, applicants when they're considering student housing to still consider what it might look like to have square footage that allows for students to access good schools while also having different, family arrangements. I don't think that we can equate a student life to a life of singledom. But we do see those applications come through often. So those would be my two questions. I guess I just also wonder, to what extent is I mean, I don't mean to question, the rationale, but this does seem to be quite a bit of work for a very small number of units on top of what is already currently being proposed. So is there a big financial incentive or something that's happening to make all of these alternative arrangements and go through the resubmission? I don't understand why something like this couldn't have been sorted out elsewhere before coming to committee.
And thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. In speaking to the grocery store, I completely agree. That's a private tenant that could change at any time. There is another grocery store just across the street, so the community is well served at this point. And whether that is a grocery store or some other amenity that hopefully is well suited to serve the residents of the building, that would be the intent. But you're right, it could be quite fluid. In terms of the process that we're going through today to add an additional 5 units and 13 total units from the OLT decision, but those previous units have gone through previous processes. There aren't many other avenues to take here. It could be a minor variance application that we could have proceeded with, or the new delegated authority minor zoning bylaw amendment, which this application likely would have been eligible for, although it was submitted before that process was in place. And so we are here today. It is the avenue available to us. We recommended to the client not to go to the Committee of Adjustment because we were hoping to be transparent and clear about our intentions. We wanted to work with city staff to find solutions. And so we thought that bringing this application to Planning and Housing Committee was the most appropriate course of action here. And it is adding 5 units, and the motivations behind that are probably multiple. There's the acknowledgement that there are needs for more units within a building, and even 5 is substantial, both in addressing housing shortages and also addressing the business model of the property owner. And so it is what it is in terms of the process that was required to bring this application forward.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. News as of this morning is that the applicant is in receivership, and that a Toronto-based receiver has control of its portfolio in Ottawa. So does that impact this property at all?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I can't really speak to their financial obligations outside of this planning application. I do know that this building, as I mentioned previously, is under new ownership and management, and the applicant has brought forth this application on behalf of the property, but the management and ownership team is
Okay.
not the previous
Okay,
team.
so it's a new owner. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other questions from members. I do have a couple of questions. I don't want to make any assumptions here. I was taking a look at the report. If I may read from the section on page 14. A revision to the building permit was issued in 2024 for the quote unquote fit up of 5 amenity rooms, which included modifications to 5 small amenity rooms to include elements such as toilets, bathtubs, showers, and kitchens. Building code services staff expressed concerns with these amenity rooms looking exactly like the dwelling units in the building, but ultimately issued a permit. I won't read the rest. Are the 5 amenity rooms that you're proposing to create those units about which building code services have said already look like the rest of the apartments?
I do believe those are the units they're referencing, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I didn't want to make any assumptions there. Staff have gone through multiple policy documents to indicate how this request is not in conformity with them. There is one note that I'm a little bit confused, and I just want to check out with you. You showed a bike room. One of the areas with which staff felt the proposal is inconsistent was the transit-oriented development guidelines. Staff have determined that the proposal is not consistent with those. What they've said is it's inconsistent with the requirement for facilities and amenities that support active transportation. How many bikes does that bike room fit?
In total, Mr. Chair, the building provides for the bylaw required amount of bicycle parking, so the 0.5 per unit. What they're doing right now to try to find that additional amenity space, to find that additional amenity space that I spoke to, is converting the bicycle racks from those less efficient traditional ground mounted bicycle racks to the more efficient stacked and horizontal and wall mounted. And so each bicycle room is changing the amount of bikes that it can provide, but in total, they're providing the full 0.5 required.
Okay, I'm going to ask staff about that. I think they made a great case in virtually every policy document except for that one seemed a little bit of a stretch, especially knowing that they've provided that space. Staff have also written that while an addition of 5 dwelling units may seem trivial on the surface, these units would in fact replace 161.2 meters squared of currently available amenity area, which at the bylaw required 6 meters squared per unit would be the amenity area normally required for approximately 27 dwelling units. So I hear Councillor Brockington's point with respect to the seeming superficiality of the number of units being added here, but ordinarily removing the amenity space that would remove would serve a couple of dozen units. I wanted to clarify with you, I thought I heard in your presentation at the start that they're not converting amenity space that exists today, but then you said they are converting amenity space. How should we characterize the spaces that are going to be converted? Is it currently available amenity space?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if I wasn't clear. The 5 units that they're hoping to create are directly converted from existing amenity study rooms.
Okay.
And then I think maybe where I confused you slightly, they're also converting some unused commercial and storage space to amenity space.
Okay.
To try to make up for that loss. We are trying with the applicant and working with the city to find as much amenity space, specifically large aggregate area that can function well and serve on a critical mass more appropriately to the building's residents than these smaller, less well-used individual units.
So when staff say that it would remove 161.2 meters of currently available amenity space, do I understand that you would be adding some back in through the conversion of that unused commercial space?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that was the intent.
So what would do you know what the net number would be?
in total.
Yeah.
And this hasn't been confirmed with staff, but based on our calculations of the floor plans and the floor layouts, we're attempting to add an additional 880, I believe, new square meters of amenity space to bring the total to approximately 2,000 square feet, 21,000 square feet, 2,000 square meters, to mitigate the concerns raised by staff about the loss of these 5 units on the 3rd floor and penthouse floor.
Okay, so your assertion is that there would be more amenity space, that the 161.2 would be more than made up for with the addition of other space that would be converted to amenity.
In that direct conversion, yes.
Okay.
We are still asking, obviously, for the reduction in amenity space, but in terms of converting from the existing units to the amenity space elsewhere, we are more than making up for that loss.
Significant net new.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll have questions for staff on that. I don't see any other questions from members, so thank you very much for your time today, gentlemen. Members, questions for staff? Councillor Troster.
Hi, it's a question for our legal staff. I mean, it is so rare for us to see a refusal recommendation come from staff, and I'm just wondering if it's our legal team's assertion that if we were to refuse this application, that it would stand up at the OLT.
Mr. Chair, this one, I have some history on this matter. I have been consulted with by planning throughout this process and when it came forward and the work that was done in order to result in the zoning and the site plan that is on site. And the amenity area has always been a significant concern by staff. I have no doubt that such is what led to the staff recommendation, and there certainly is a solid basis for the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I just want to make sure I understand the numbers because there's a lot being thrown around. So originally, under the bylaw, there would be 6 meters squared per unit required in amenity space, but that was amended by a tribunal decision that brings it to about 4.09 meters of amenity space per unit. Do I have that right so far?
Thank you for the question. I can clarify that the OLT's decision established a minimum total amenity area of 2,200 and not a specific rate tied to the change in dwelling units.
So, okay, so a minimum of just over 4 meters per dwelling unit.
That's correct, yeah.
And then what the applicant is seeking, if they're successful here, would reduce that further to 2.33 meters per dwelling unit.
The application that was received at the beginning of, the number that was identified in the original application that was submitted to staff and put on circulation through our notification process was approximately 1,300 square meters, which is what they were proposing in total amenity area. So that, and if you look at that compared to today's requirements, zoning requirements at 6 square meters per dwelling unit, that is a reduction from 3,400 to 1,300.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a significant reduction, and given the size of the unit, I don't think it's fair for anyone to say even, oh, it's only student apartments or it's only aimed at students, so they have less of a requirement. It seems like a drastic reduction in the amenity space per unit. So I think staff is right to recommend refusal on this, but listen to the other questions and comments from committee members. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I asked about receivership is I do think it's relevant to the viability of this project. We heard that it has been sold. We got this report on Thursday, which referenced the previous owner. The applicant was talking about unlocking new amenity space, which I believe you just said you had not contemplated. That's new information.
It's not new information as of today. We received that information during the development review process. But as I mentioned, the numbers that were circulated through our notification process at the beginning of the application was a reduction from the OLT approved number, which was 2,200 square meters, to 1,300 square meters approximately.
So it doesn't change, like what we heard today does not change staff stance that it should be refused. I'm wondering if it should be.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. That's it, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I'm willing to put a motion on the floor for the committee to consider. And my motion, in essence, would be the same motion we have before us, but the word refuse would be amended with approve. And colleagues can see the additional line at the bottom of clause 1, which would be adding the words "and planning staff prepare and submit to council the necessary zoning bylaw." What caused me to pause before I spoke, Chair, is I believe the number 1,349.8 meters squared is likely to change because of the testimony we heard from the delegates this morning. So I wouldn't want to pass a motion that says 1,349.8 when in fact they've given indication that the amenity space could even be larger than what we have now. All this to say, I'm satisfied with the conversion proposal that they've outlined here today. I appreciate what our staff have had to do, and I appreciate the staff recommendation based on all the information they've had. But I want to put this on the table today for the committee to contemplate and to vote on first ahead of the staff recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I would suggest that you read it out. Sorry, you want to make an approval motion? Motion to approve?
I've put that motion on the floor, Chair. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to read it out?
Staff have it on the screen. So it's exactly this.
Can I ask you to read it out?
Yes, I can, Chair. So that Planning and Housing Committee recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 256 Rideau and 211 Bezerer as shown in document 1 to permit a minimum total amenity area of 1,349.8 meters squared for 579 dwelling units, whereas a minimum total amenity area of 2,277.6 meters squared is required for 566 dwelling units. And planning staff prepare and submit to the council the necessary zoning bylaw. Clause 2 would be the same, Chair. Planning and Housing Committee approve the consultation detail section of this report be included as part of the brief explanation and the summary of written and oral public submissions to be prepared by the Office of the City Clerk and submitted to council in the report titled, quote, summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act, explanation requirements at the end of City Council meeting of February 26, 2025, subject to submissions received between the publication of this report and the time of council's decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are dozens of people who are watching / listening to this on YouTube, some of whom may not be able to see the screen. Oh, it's important to have it read out. Councillor Kavanagh. Sorry, I'll just say very quickly, Councillor Brockington's motion to approve will be voted on first. If that fails, we'll move on to the motion to refuse. If that fails, it'll move on to a matter to be considered by council without recommendation, unless somebody puts a referral or a tabling on the table. I'll leave it there. Councillor Tierney? No, Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. And I appreciate you're doing your job. You're doing with what is recommended for the zoning. What I'm wondering is when I think of buildings that exist, they don't have much amenity space. I'm sort of aware of that older buildings don't have it. It's a newer requirement because I'm looking around at older buildings in my ward and for the reason that we're looking to put, hold meetings in an old building, and they don't have amenity space where you could meet. Condos do, but not apartments. And that seems to be the trend. They don't have much meeting. I'm going to call it meeting space, like an empty room, but amenity space is much broader than that. So this is a more recent requirement to have that.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure of the origin of how far back our bylaws go in terms of amenity area requirements, but I can certainly confirm, since I've been with the city for about 15 years, that number's been the status quo. So it's at least that old. I think what's more important to answer that question, that as cities evolve and so do provincial and municipal regulations, and we see updates from time to time across the Planning Act or PPS and our official plan, there has been an evolution towards stronger language, such as promoting social inclusion, fostering things like amenity area and quality of life. There has been, I'll say at a high policy level, a stronger policy shift, which then comes back down into our zoning bylaws. And I've been at OLT hearings where that language is actually very important. It was instrumental during the pandemic to have those opportunities for social inclusion, spaces where people can have amenity gathering safely, that sort of thing. So I can't directly answer your question. I'm sure we could dig it up in terms of the origin of when did amenity space become a requirement in our bylaw. But the short answer is, I think more importantly, we're seeing it as more of a shift over time, as something that's probably more important than how it was viewed years ago.
Thank you. And the reason I like Ottawa Community Housing always has amenity space. It's just automatic. We do that so that people can meet and socialize. And this is clearly, get more units, get more money. So that's the bottom line. So that's why they want to go that direction. So it is a balancing act, and the fact that it's just targeted at students, but we don't know the future. Things change, and it could be a seniors building in the future. And then it would be really, really important to have social space. It was raised by Councillor Curry about other cities. I don't know, is this just an Ottawa thing, or I'm just trying to explore, are we different? Are we similar? Like, is this something that, why would it be different in a different city, the amenity space requirement? And it's an observation, so I don't know the details.
Thanks, Chair. We can take that back as well if you want actual numbers or comparables, but I can say that other cities do require amenity area. I would venture to say that there is probably some variation in terms of requirements from municipality to municipality, but requirements nonetheless. I think the other thing to highlight as well is that amenity area can come in a number of different forms, right? Both communal or private. I think there was reference to balconies, which are a typical private amenity, especially in a multi-residential building. But communal amenity area can be a number of different things, like meeting rooms, pools, the lobby, gyms, flex space. So we don't regulate how amenity is provided. It's just that there is a variety of amenity provided, and a developer can choose all those different forms of amenity depending on their building typology and the market they're going after. So we don't get into that, but certainly it can come in a number of different forms.
Okay. I'm just looking at my anecdotal evidence of buildings I've seen and what they provide. But this is something, when I think about how small those units are, go stir crazy if you stayed in those all day. You'd have to get out, walk around, maybe, like the whole idea of a study area. So I'm going to support the staff on this. It kind of hurts because we want the more units, but it was already reduced. And I think that that's fair that there was a compromise, but it's not being accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Brockington wanted to make an amendment to his motion I think is pertinent, so I'll just ask him to do that now.
Thank you, Chair, and with the committee's indulgence in speaking with the applicant to get a more clear understanding of the amount of amenity area that would be provided, I'd like to amend the motion before us, and where it says to permit a minimum total amenity area of 1,349.8 meters, that number be replaced with 2,000 meters. And again, the applicant is here if you want to confirm that, Chair.
And I do just want to make sure that that's amenable to the applicant. Okay, we received that confirmation that they're amenable to that. Councillor Tierney?
Great, thank you, and thanks for coming out today. I think the question on what's in front of us today comes down to also the success. I truly appreciate Tim Mark's response to success or not success. I think this is one of these situations where we have a product that's not fully baked in front of us again. And we fall in this trap quite a bit. I actually have an application coming in for a 21-story on Montreal Road where they don't have a service connection. I know staff are like, well, if you can't connect, why are you bringing this forward? Just to sit on the land forever? And that's usually where, you know, we have to use the tools we have to push industry to be able to make and build the units. And I'm just not sold that this is a final plan. It seems to keep moving. So, you know, I'm gonna support the staff recommendation. I think it's important that we're consistent. I do appreciate the applicant coming out to speak to it. We certainly need units, but again, it's not baked. And I don't want to go out and start saying, yeah, and then have people sitting on properties forever not being developed, and we just get everyone all worked up for nothing. If they come in with a fully baked solution that they can present, I feel much more comfortable. So that's my position on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Kitts?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment to agree with the previous speaker. As Councillor Trosser said, we don't see refusals often. I don't think staff bring them forward lightly. They referenced quality of life as a reason to refuse it because amenity space is important. And I think that is valid. So I will be supporting staff on this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you very much. So I appreciate just to understand the numbers. So the idea that the 2,000 that is now being proposed in the Brockington motion is still a reduction of amenity space required by the OLT, right? We're still not there. So, you know, I have to say, you know, I appreciate Councillor Kavanagh suggesting that Ottawa Community Housing always has amenity space. I would actually think that that's going to be a pressure for all developers, regardless of whether or not you have some of the financial tools that the Ottawa Community Housing has with the city. We're always trying to squeak out more housing, but there is a tipping point, and certainly the pandemic, as referenced, you know, when I was working for another affordable housing developer during the pandemic, it was a very intense situation where you had tenants really stacked up on top of each other, not able to, you know, understand. All the parks were closed. I mean, it was a wild time. And so there are trade-offs to a quality of life, whether it's a unit square footage or an amenity space. I am uncomfortable with the suggestion by building code that these units were fitted up. I think that's something that you actually see at the Committee of Adjustment frequently, where a proponent will come with conveniently fitted up units that were promised in one application to be XYZ and then are switched over to further units. It erodes the trust with the community, and we end up having, you know, further suspicions when it comes to this committee's integrity as well. So I will support the staff on this because I believe that we need to, as my colleague has said, deliver to the public what the applications look like on their face, and these further sort of tweaks and adjustments down the line are what erodes trust with the public when it comes to development. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I hear what everyone is saying here. I guess I would just say, having been in these types of buildings in Kingston, you can't imagine how amazing it would be to be a student living in a building like this, where, as they've shown you, there's a pool, there's outdoor amenity, there's barbecues, there's all these study areas such that kids come from other parts of the city to these buildings. and study with them because they live in these little houses. You just think about what student housing is like, where kids get a bedroom for $1,000 a month and they're sharing a kitchen with 6 other people and a living room. You know, they would be in heaven if they had the option of a pool and an outdoor barbecue area and a study area that has individual rooms and soundproof rooms. Like, kids are practicing their flutes in these soundproof rooms. Like, they're absolutely stunning buildings. So, I mean, I hear you then, and I tend to always support staff, and I hear the history of this and what everyone has said all along the way. But I think that, you know, while we advocate for amenity space, and this is students, hence the reason I asked at the beginning about whether this could ever be converted for seniors. The amenity space here is very high end. And, you know, given the other options for students, I would love to be able to say that, you know, 5 more students would have this as an option as opposed to living in a moldy basement in a dilapidated house where landlords are just milking the students and giving them absolutely nothing. You know, fridges and stoves that are so old that the kids can hardly cook on them. And this has like a shared kitchen area, like in addition to having a kitchen in their own room. So, I mean, I guess if you'd ever seen these buildings in Kingston, you would be thinking, wow, that they could offer 5 more kids these opportunities. I just, I don't see it the same way, but, you know, the vote will be the vote. But I just would encourage you all to go and visit a building like this and see if you wouldn't love for your student to live in a place like this.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll just note that I'm on the website for the building right now, which is now called Alma, and it advertises private study areas on the front page as one of the amenities. So anyone who rented an apartment in this development, even now, would expect that those spaces would remain. I don't doubt that they're quite beautiful. The finishes look really nice, but they're still 300 square feet. And as Councillor Johnson was saying, we saw during the pandemic what happens when people are shut into spaces like that with no other place to go. I think this is a tough one, but I'm uncomfortable going against the staff recommendation here because we're not asking for much. There's a consistent problem in the downtown core that we're replacing older, larger apartments with really, really tiny units, which per square foot are really, really expensive. And so I don't doubt that it could be great to live here as a student, but stacking people on top of each other, reducing the amount of amenity space, and decreasing the quality of life in a downtown building, I think is really problematic. Even some of the developments in my ward that are very pricey, that are designed for adults, that are technically 2 bedrooms, I've gone in and seen how the bed is just kind of shoved into a room with nothing on either side of you. I don't think development has to be like this. And so I just think it would be really disingenuous to the current tenants to remove the small amount of amenity space that they already have. So I'm inclined to vote with staff on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. I don't see any other questions to staff. I'd also encourage members to support the staff recommendation. The proposal under the Brockington motion would be to provide a minimum of 2,000 square meters of amenity space. That is enough, according to our bylaw, to serve 333 units. The proposed development, once they convert the 5 units that have already been put in place as units, despite not having approval to be used as units, would require, 3,474 square meters of space. Staff have bent on amenity space. The OLT has bent on amenity space, but we do need to draw a hard line at some point. And when you take a look at the city staff's recommendations, their report, they have put in place an exhaustive case that the proposal is not consistent with the PPS. It is not in conformity with the official plan. It does not conform to the policies of the Central and East Downtown Secondary Plan. It is not consistent with the urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings, and it is not supported by the zoning bylaw. I like Mr. Mark's odds of defending our refusal if that is the direction we go. So with that, I would ask for a vote first on the Brockington motion. Do you want to add? Yep.
Chair, I just have two minor points to make. The first is we are in a housing emergency. We've declared it, and we should do everything we can to facilitate housing, despite the fact that it's a small number of units being made. On principle, this committee should look at through the lens of the emergency that we have declared 5 years ago. The reason why I support this, Chair, is I believe this is a reasonable repurposement, if that's a word, of amenity space. We've heard how amenity space that's going to be given up for units is going to be, there'll be other parts of underutilized space within this property, and new amenity space will be created. And that for me strikes the reasonableness of this argument and why I put this forward for this committee's consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Repurposement is a word now.
Yeah.
So first I'll ask the committee coordinator to do a vote on the Brockington motion. If you believe that the development should be approved despite the staff recommendation, vote yes.
Councillor Brockington,
Yes.
Councillor Curry,
Yes.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Johnson,
No.
Councillor Kavanaugh,
No.
Councillor Kelly,
No.
Councillor Kitts,
No.
Councillor Lowe,
Yes.
Councillor Tierney,
No.
Councillor Troster,
No.
Vice Chair Gower,
No.
and Chair Leeper.
No.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
That fails. The original staff recommendation is before us then to refuse. I'll ask for a vote on that, please.
Councillor Brockington,
No.
Councillor Curry,
No.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Johnson,
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Councillor Kelly,
Yes.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Lowe,
No.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Troster,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower,
Yes.
and Chair Leeper.
Yes.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
Refusal carries. That'll move on to our next council, I believe. Yes. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a good thorough hearing of that, which obviously the applicant deserves. Heading through. Okay, our next substantive item is the zoning. Oh, okay. We don't have a public delegation anymore for the March Road. Did members wish to receive the presentation?
We love you all.
Yeah. To the planning team, if the committee is prepared to carry this, do you still wish to speak? Does that item carry? Thank you, colleagues.
I like to dissent on that one, Chair.
Okay, registering a dissent from Councillor Kelly on that one. We have no in-camera, or have we got everything? Yes. We don't have any in-camera items. We have received information previously distributed memos on the residential dwelling approval pipeline in the Cashew Parkland. Are there any notices for consideration at a subsequent meeting? I don't see any. Are there any inquiries? Nope. We have no other business. We are adjourned until our next meeting on Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Okay.